oh cool, we might just get in-car voice-activated toilets before GTA 6. Isn't that just par for the course? Yes, a Chinese automaker has filed a patent for an in-car toilet system for passenger cars that unfurls itself from underneath the passenger's seat like a peeping Tom. And while this is probably the most ridiculous automotive story in at least the last 30 days, the weirdest part about it is that it kinda makes sense. The role of the car has been changing over the past decade to where the expense of new cars needs to be justified through function. Simply put, to be worth all the extra money they cost now, cars have to do more. And so we get fancy infotainment systems, massaging seats, center console cooler boxes, and potentially, now, toilets. And at the risk of deploying hyperbole, a potential in-car toilet may be funny, but what it implies about the state of the auto industry isn't all that humorous unless it gives us an excuse to rename our entire economic system Crapitalism. Because cars are supposed to connect us to places, not replace those places altogether, you know? But then, is an in-car toilet actually that crazy an idea for a passenger car? How would this system actually work? And what can we learn about modern car ownership from the ultimate porta potty? It's the end of the month, and you know what that means.
Roman report at the end of the month, and I make what I want when I feel like discussing cars.
On April 10th, a patent for an in-car toilet filed by Chinese automaker Ceres was finally approved in China. I say finally because the patent was actually filed in April 2025, because the wheels of administration and bureaucracy move more patiently than a guy who's waiting for his devout mother to die before coming out as atheist. According to the company, the feature is intended to, quote, satisfy users' toilet needs on long journeys while camping or while staying in the car, end quote. So yeah, basically what you'd think an in-car toilet would be for. Now, BBC got hold of the patent filing and found that the toilet would slide out from under the passenger's seat either through voice commands or through a quote-unquote push. Although one would think in most emergency bathroom scenarios, the push comes after and not before. Ugh. As BBC explains of the onboard toilet's function, quote, the loo will come with a fan and exhaust pipe to channel odors out of the car, according to the filing on China's Intellectual Property Administration seen by the BBC. Waste is collected in a tank that has to be emptied manually. The toilet also features a rotating heating element that evaporates urine and dries other waste. When not in use, the toilet is concealed beneath the seat, making full use of the space inside a car without requiring more room. End quote. And you can kind of see how it works through the diagram, or how it would work anyway. Although, as with anything mechanical, my immediate concern is about any potential points of failure, because that's just going to be a very messy, very unpleasant situation if it doesn't work as intended every single time, you know what I mean? Now, naturally, this has understandably gotten a lot of press coverage in international automotive publications, because it's rich with novelty. But I don't think it's a bad idea. Not really. I mean, I don't think its purpose is to discourage people from pulling over to use actual restrooms. To me, I think it seems designed more for one of two scenarios. One where you get to choose, and the other where the call of nature chooses for you. So for example, choosing to camp in the woods and needing to take a leak, but otherwise having freedom of movement is one scenario, because you're not really being pressured into just going wherever you have available. Now you actually have an option. But that's a very different situation than being stuck in traffic with a full bladder and no end in sight to all the gridlock. One situation is about supplying convenience, and the other is about supplying an alternative to ruining the seats because the bottle you chose to go in filled up quicker than you thought it would. While a toilet in an RV is preferable because it provides an entirely separate, closed-off area, not just compartment, but like a whole little area for that business to happen, rather than in the literal front passenger's seat, I can at least appreciate that the design takes measures to keep the waste from befouling the cabin as much as possible, lest the auto industry give us new meaning for the term enshittification. Now, for what it's worth, toilets inside of cars aren't a new idea, and I don't just mean in the RV camper sense. In 1952, when engineer Louis Mattard took his 1947 Cadillac Fleetwood on a 6,320-mile round trip from LA to New York, the car was modified to include a built-in chemical toilet, which was more of a portable sanitation unit that used chemicals to break down waste. There was also a one-off Rolls-Royce Silver Wraith limo designed back in 1954 to have a passenger seat crapper that doubled as a champagne cooling box, which really gives new meaning to the phrase bottoms up. But weirder still, while the waste was stored in a container, there was a mechanism to empty that container while driving, which, if nothing else, seems like a great way to get people to stop tailgating you. In more modern times, there was an attempt by an American engineer to patent an in-car waste collection system back in the ancient, long-ago year of 2016. But this in-car toilet patent by Saris represents a significant step forward in crapitalism, because this patent was actually approved. For their part, they haven't actually announced any upcoming vehicles that might use this toilet tech, and for all we know, none of their cars ever will. And if they do, who knows if they ever make their way west. But considering how often automakers look toward China to sort of see which way the winds might end up blowing in the auto industry, I can't say it would surprise me if it did head in that direction. As a luxury EV automaker whose slogan is intelligence redefining luxury, Saris and subsidiary Aito are among the few automakers in the Chinese market to turn an actual profit on electrification, rather than spending so much in production that even large volumes of sales can't make up the difference. Granted, they're no BYD, but then who is? And hey, BYD sure isn't thinking about making a car crapper.
Yet.
Regardless, this advancement is interesting not for what it is, so much as for what it tells us about the shifting role of the passenger car in modern society. And this is where I get into my editorializing, because in my opinion, all this seems to be saying is that, well, a car can't just be a car anymore, you know? And yeah, we've practically built this entire channel on the concept that no car is just a car. It always represents something beyond itself. It always has a deeper meaning, whether it's as part of a specific identity or as a cultural artifact. I see a Lincoln Town Car and I think of a middle manager who's having an affair and doing a really lousy job of hiding it. But at the end of the day, even for us, the most alien, abstract car will still feel like its primary purpose is to behave as a car. And that goes for even the worst cars we've reviewed. Even cars with pointless cosmetic flourishes and an extensive suite of quote-unquote comfort features feel like they're supplementing the experience of driving rather than indicating that the entire purpose of the car has changed. So you might have an AI human machine interface, but still, it's there to theoretically prevent you from taking your eyes off the road or to correct for any time that you might take your eyes off the road, with stuff like blind spot monitoring and lane keep assist as safety buffers, since it's hard to enjoy Apple CarPlay and Android Auto if you're not alive, although GM is doing their best to make that difficult either way. Of course, cars have always had features to make them more powerful and more convenient and even more comfortable. I mean, I did a video recently on concept cars that predicted the future, and even as the proposed Ford Nucleon tried to imagine a world in which a car with a nuclear reactor would ever make sense, and Nissan sketched out a possible crab-walking car with A-pillar integrated video screens in place of side mirrors, and GM conceived of a car more customizable from factory than Mr. Potato Head was straight out of the box, it still felt like those cars were meant to be transportation vessels first and foremost. But rather than being a temporary means of conveyance, the suggestion here is that cars are trying to replace the world they used to connect us to by offering as many of the comforts of home as they possibly can, as if the goal is to keep us inside our cars. The way I think of it is that it's almost like a Netflix landing page, because a Netflix, or really any streaming service, is going to show you TV shows instead of movies first, because a full season of a TV show would keep you on the app longer than just a single movie would, or even a double feature would. In a way, it makes sense that Ceres is doing this because they're an EV manufacturer, and EVs are especially amenable to being transformed into mobile living spaces, because their interiors are far more adaptable due to the extra space you get from not having to build the entire concept of the car around a bulky, restrictive engine bay. And because the selling point of an EV isn't really the drivetrain, in my opinion, so much as the overall concept of fuel savings and low emissions, the cabin itself has to pick up some of the slack and become far more attractively packaged. With roomier layouts, bigger screens. You get in-car Wi-Fi that basically turns your car into a mobile office. And then there's in-car streaming to turn your car into a mobile date spot or just a place where you can chill out and relax. There's in-car gaming, maybe not to the level of, console gaming in your man cave, but still. For crying out loud, some Chinese automakers actually have integrated karaoke systems. And then you have features like Tesla's camping mode, which is basically designed to allow you to have a temperature-controlled environment for sleeping in your car overnight, or even for just to take a nap or something. And as a car napper, I would love this personally, but also I live in a condo, so owning an EV makes zero sense for me. But still, you get all of these things, plus heated, cooled, massaging, and power-adjustable seats, cooling boxes, fold-out tables for having meals or setting up your laptop to do work. It's ridiculous, but also, hot damn is it convenient when you need it. And that's sort of the rub. By making the car more like a house, you make the time that drivers spend inside of it monetizable in ways you couldn't before, because now people have to pay extra for those home-like features. And this isn't a point I enjoy making, but in a very dystopian sort of way, turning the car into a home feels like an almost social compromise to a generation that is wrestling with the concept of ever owning a home outright. But then that is a stupidly pessimistic and cynical thought on my part. Either way, I'm ultimately not saying that we shouldn't want to spend time in our cars. I mean, if you're here right now, you probably love them as much as I do. You've probably also gone for drives, even when you didn't have anywhere to go. Because the car is freedom, it's independence, and it's something that allows us to build a life for ourselves that exists outside of our immediate surroundings. Driving is one of those things where once you start doing it, you'll wonder how you ever existed on the earth before you could. And in that sense, cars are necessary, even if they aren't always good. I talk about this in my video about the normalization of commuting, but making cars more of a third space between the home and the workplace is an extension of the pragmatic role cars serve in our lives. And yet, that's kind of the problem. Because instead of building a less car-dependent world with stuff like rail infrastructure and walkable cities, the focus has turned instead to just building a car that fulfills so many of our needs that we don't see the value in being less car-dependent. And I get why automakers would lean into this, because it affects their bottom line. It doesn't serve them at all to keep cars feeling like cars, in the same way it doesn't serve video game companies not to go for photorealism if they're capable of it. But me personally, I like good graphics and all, but I kinda want my video games to still be perceptible as video games. And I want my cars to still feel and act like cars first, instead of like a mobile version of a book nook in a local cafe. I do think China is more a window into a possible future than a hard and fast prediction of where we're headed, since their EV market is more robust and competitive and lifestyle driven. But even if this is where we're headed, I do think it's crazy to imagine how this could be logical, because an in-car toilet seems patently ridiculous, right? Until you think about it a little longer and realize, well, cars already have so many of the amenities of home. Why wouldn't it have a toilet? Why hasn't it had a toilet already for years? Where's the future I, personally, individually, and solely was promised? If I have to pull over, drop trow, and crouch in a thicket that later turns out to have been poison ivy, then what are we even doing here? And then it compounds the more you think, because why shouldn't I have backup cameras? It's easier than having to look outside. Why shouldn't I have blind spot monitoring? It's easier than checking my blind spots myself. Why shouldn't I have massaging seats? Driving long distances is tiring. Why shouldn't I have a cooler box? I deserve temperature-controlled road snacks. Why shouldn't I be able to watch a movie or take a nap in perfect comfort in the rest area off the turnpike, if that's what I feel like doing? And hey, I agree. You should have that freedom if that's what you value. No judgment here, because cars mean different things to different people. And there's a completely understandable, valid rationale behind wanting your car to be more like a home away from home, considering how much of our lives we're likely to spend in our car as we drive to and from work, or as we drive for errands or leisure. But I do think there's something amusing and insightful about the concept of an onboard toilet. For generations, automakers have sold cars by essentially selling a fantasy of long stretches of open roads set against backdrops of sunsets or clusters of trees set deep into the mountains, an endless summer, a limitless escape, a vast and modular landscape of imagination, as filtered through pure, undiluted possibility. But a toilet sort of throws cold water on the fantasy, doesn't it? It's like a grocery store romance novel where the woman finally rips the guy's shirt open in a flurry of passion, and he has a tattoo of Jared from Subway on his chest. It just kills the mood, although the difference here is that while it might kill the mood, a toilet is actually useful. But basically, the toilet is an unsexy reminder of your personal circumstances, that you've really gotta go and you don't have any other choices for where you can go. And so the meaning of the car has shifted from going to going. Not everybody loves driving, not everybody loves cars, or maybe it's a love-hate relationship where you love cars but resent how dependent upon them society has become. In that sense, the addition of all of these creature comforts helps ease some of that tension. But simply from an operational standpoint, I do worry that more stuff getting added onto cars means more points of failure on them. And I talked about this earlier, but this is still something that I can't I can't separate it from the idea of what an in-car toilet is. Because say one of those press-in, pop-out fuel doors gets stuck. That's bad enough, but I don't love the idea of the same thing happening to a pop-out onboard toilet, you know? But here's the thing. A lot of Roman reports over the years have focused on consumer interest. Car prices being high, dealerships ripping you off, car technology collecting your data and using it to sell you out to your insurance company, so on and so forth. And so I guess the expectation is probably that I would view this as an overall bad sign for the future of cars. But ultimately, I don't think the possible addition of an onboard toilet at some nebulous point in the future tells us anything we didn't already know. That the meaning of cars continues to shift from performance, reliability, and utility towards comfort and convenience. Where before a car might exist to answer the question, where to, it now feels like it might eventually serve as an answer to an entirely different question. How long will you be staying with us? But what do you think? Is an onboard toilet a good idea? What do you think this tells us about the future of the auto industry? Is it much ado about nothing, or something worth having a larger discussion about? Let me know in the comments. I'm reading them all. Be on the lookout for me. My screen name is Limited Time Roman. If you enjoyed the video, please like, comment, and share it, or even subscribe, and tap the bell icon so you're notified for every new video. But if you want these videos early and ad-free, along with other exclusive content, or you just want to support us to continue even making these videos, join us over on Patreon for just $1. Merch links are in the description, so definitely check those out if you want to rep the brand. But regardless, thank you so much for watching, and have an amazing rest of your week.